Last night, Jimmy Fallon's show exploded as Amber Heard's lies unraveled live on air. A fiery clash erupted, exposing her deceit. Tension soared, secrets spilled, and the audience was left stunned as the drama unfolded in a shocking confrontation. The lights dimmed in Studio 6B, and the crowd roared as Jimmy Fallon bounded onto the set, his signature grin lighting up the room. The Tonight Show was in full swing, and tonight's guest was none other than Amber Heard, Hollywood's polarizing star. The buzz in the air was electric, but beneath the surface, something felt off. Amber, dressed in a sleek black dress, strode out to polite applause, her smile tight, her eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up prey. Jimmy, ever the charming host, kicked things off with his usual warmth, tossing softballs about her latest film project. The audience laughed at his quips, but Amber's responses were clipped, her demeanor guarded. You could feel the tension creeping in, like a storm cloud inching across a clear sky. Jimmy leaned forward, his tone still light but probing. "So, Amber, you've been in the headlines a lot lately. Care to set the record straight on some of the noise out there?" The question was innocent enough, but it landed like a spark in a powder keg. Amber's smile faltered, and for a split second her eyes flashed with something, anger, maybe fear. She laughed it off, tossing her hair. "Oh, Jimmy, you know how the media loves to twist things. I'm just living my truth, you know." The audience clapped, but it was tepid, uncertain. Jimmy raised an eyebrow, his grin sharpening. "Living your truth, huh? That's a great soundbite, but let's dig into that. What's the truth about those court documents that just leaked?" The crowd gasped. The question was a curveball, and Amber wasn't ready. Her face froze, her lips parting, slightly as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The court documents, freshly leaked and plastered across social media, alleged new details about her past legal battles, contradicting her public narrative. Jimmy, usually the king of keeping things light, wasn't backing down. "I mean, people are talking, Amber. They're saying those documents paint a different picture. You want to clear that up for us?" His tone was still playful, but there was an edge to it, a challenge. Amber's composure cracked. She shifted in her seat, her hands gripping the armrests. "Jimmy, I don't think this is the place to rehash old news. I'm here to talk about my work, not tabloid garbage." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the studio's warmth like a blade. The audience murmured, sensing the shift. Jimmy tilted his head, unfazed. "Old news? These docs dropped yesterday, Amber. They're saying you fabricated some pretty serious claims. That's not just tabloid stuff, that's legal." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and curiosity. Amber's eyes darted to the audience, then back to Jimmy. "You're really going there, huh?" she said, her voice low, almost menacing. Jimmy didn't blink. "Hey, I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. You've got a platform here. Set it straight." He leaned back, arms crossed, his smile now a faint memory. The audience was riveted, phones already out, capturing every second. Amber's jaw tightened, and for a moment it looked like she might bolt. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice dripping with defiance. "You want the truth, Jimmy? The truth is, people love to tear down a woman who stands up for herself. Those documents? They're cherry-picked lies, and you're falling for it." The accusation hung in the air, and the crowd erupted in a mix of boos and cheers. Jimmy raised a hand, calming them. "Whoa, whoa, let's not get it twisted. I'm not falling for anything. I'm asking you to explain why those docs say what they say. Like, for example, the part about the audio recordings." He paused, letting the words sink in. The audience went dead silent. The audio recordings, leaked alongside the documents, were damning, capturing Amber in moments that contradicted her public persona. Social media had been ablaze with clips, and now Jimmy was dragging them into the spotlight. Amber's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, her voice rising. "Those recordings are out of context. You're ambushing me, Jimmy. This isn't fair." The crowd stirred, some shouting support, others heckling. Jimmy shook his head, his tone steady but firm. "Ambushing? Amber, you're on a talk show. People want answers. I'm giving you the chance to give them." He gestured to the audience, who were now on the edge of their seats. Amber's eyes narrowed and she leaned closer, her voice a hiss. "You think you're some big-shot journalist now? You're just a comedian playing gotcha." The insult landed hard. The audience gasped, and Jimmy's smile vanished entirely. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk, his gaze locked on her. "A comedian, sure, but I'm also someone who doesn't like being fed lies. So what's it gonna be, Amber? You gonna tell us what's real, or keep dodging?" The studio was a pressure cooker, every eye on Amber. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face was a mask of fury. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. The silence stretched, unbearable, as the world waited for her next move. The silence in Studio 6B was deafening, every eye fixed on Amber Heard as she sat, frozen, her fury barely contained. Jimmy Fallon's challenge hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. "What's it gonna be, Amber? You gonna tell us what's real, or keep dodging?" Her hands, still trembling, gripped the armrests of her chair, knuckles whitening. The audience held its breath, the tension so thick it felt like the room itself was vibrating. Amber's eyes flicked to the crowd, then back to Jimmy, her expression a volatile mix of defiance and desperation. Finally she spoke, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've got me cornered, Jimmy? You think you can just throw around accusations and play judge and jury?" Jimmy didn't flinch. His elbows stayed planted on his desk, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not playing anything, Amber. I'm asking you to own your story. Those audio recordings, your voice, your words, are out there for the world to hear. You can't just wave that away." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some nodding in agreement, others whispering in shock. The leaked recordings had been trending online for hours, clips of Amber's voice admitting to things that clashed violently with her public narrative of victimhood. Social media was merciless, and now Jimmy was bringing that firestorm into the studio. Amber's lips curled into a sneer. "You're loving this, aren't you? The great Jimmy Fallon getting his clicks by tearing me down." Her words dripped with sarcasm, but there was a tremor beneath them, a crack in her armor. The audience stirred, some booing, others shouting, encouragement, creating a chaotic symphony of noise. Jimmy raised a hand, quieting them, his face deadly serious. "This isn't about clicks, Amber. It's about the truth. You've been telling one story for years, but those recordings? They tell a different one. So why don't you explain it to us? Right now." The challenge was a gauntlet thrown down, and Amber's eyes blazed. She leaned forward, her voice rising, sharp enough to cut glass. "You want an explanation? Fine. Those recordings were manipulated, taken out of context to make me look like the villain. You're buying into a smear campaign, Jimmy, and you're too naive to see it." The accusation sparked a fresh wave of gasps from the audience. Jimmy's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool, his voice steady. "Manipulated? That's a bold claim. The internet's got the full tapes, Amber. People have heard them. You're saying it's all fake?" Amber shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the stage. "I'm saying it's a setup. You think you know everything because you read some tweets? You're out of your depth, Jimmy." The audience roared, a mix of cheers and jeers, as she paced a tight circle, her heels clicking sharply. Jimmy stood, too, a rare move for him, his height giving him a quiet authority. "Out of my depth? I'm just asking questions, Amber. Questions you don't seem to want to answer." His tone was calm but biting, and the crowd ate it up, their phones capturing every second of the escalating drama. Amber spun to face him, her finger jabbing the air. "You're not asking questions. You're accusing me. You're putting me On trial in front of millions. Her voice cracked, betraying a flicker of panic. The audience was a powder keg, some shouting, "Tell the truth," while others chanted her name in support. Jimmy didn't back down, stepping around his desk to close the distance between them. "You're on a talk show, Amber, not a courtroom. But if you're feeling cornered, maybe it's because the truth's catching up. You can't keep dodging forever." The words hit like a slap, and Amber's face flushed with rage. "You have no idea what I've been through," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the crowd's noise. "You sit there, smug, thinking, you've cracked the case. You're just a puppet for the headlines." Jimmy's eyes narrowed, his patience fraying. "A puppet? I'm giving you a chance to tell your side, and you're throwing insults instead. If the recordings are fake, prove it. Right now. Tell us what really happened." Amber froze, her breath hitching. The studio was a cauldron of noise, the audience's chants and jeers blending into a chaotic hum. Her eyes darted to the exit, then back to Jimmy, who stood firm, waiting. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice low, almost a growl. "The truth is, people like you love a witch hunt. You don't care about facts. You care about drama." She took a step toward him, her voice rising. "You're not a hero, Jimmy. You're just another guy cashing in on my pain." The audience exploded, the noise deafening. Jimmy shook his head, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Cashing in? I'm doing my job, Amber. You're the one spinning stories. If you've got nothing to hide, why's it so hard to answer? A simple question?" The crowd roared louder, some chanting, "Jimmy, Jimmy," while others booed Amber. She stood there, chest heaving, her eyes wild with fury. For a moment it looked like she might lunge at him. Instead, she turned to the audience, her voice shaking with emotion. "You all think you know me? You don't know anything." The words were a desperate plea, but they only fueled the crowd's frenzy. Jimmy watched, his expression unreadable as Amber's facade began to crumble, her next move hanging in the balance. The studio was a furnace, the audience's roars crashing like waves as Amber Heard stood center stage, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a mix of fury and desperation. "You all think you know me? You don't know anything," she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. The crowd's response was a chaotic blend of boos, cheers, and chants of "Jimmy, Jimmy," that pulsed through Studio 6B. Jimmy Fallon, still standing, his face a mask of calm intensity, didn't let her words slide. "I'm doing my job, Amber," he repeated, his voice slicing through the noise. "You're the one spinning stories. If you've got nothing to hide, why's it so hard to answer a simple question?" His words were a challenge, unrelenting, and the audience leaned forward, phones aloft, capturing every second of the escalating showdown. Amber's head snapped back to him, her eyes narrowing to slits. "A simple question?" she spat, her voice dripping with scorn. "You're not asking questions, Jimmy. You're setting traps. You think you can humiliate me on live TV and call it journalism?" The accusation sent a ripple through the crowd, some hissing in disapproval, others shouting her name in support. Amber paced a step, her heels clicking sharply, her hands clenched into fists. "You're no different from the tabloids, fishing for dirt to feed the mob." She gestured wildly at the audience, who erupted again, their voices a tangled roar of conflicting loyalties. Jimmy's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed even, cutting. "Humiliate you? Amber, I'm giving you a chance to clear your name. Those recordings, your voice, admitting things, aren't going away. People want to know why you said what you said. So stop deflecting and start talking." The crowd's noise swelled, a mix of cheers for Jimmy's bluntness and jeers aimed at Amber. Her face flushed, her composure fraying like a threadbare rope. "You're obsessed with those recordings," she snapped, her voice rising to a near scream. "They're edited, twisted, taken out of context to destroy me. You're just too lazy to see the truth." The audience gasped, the insult landing like a punch. Jimmy's eyes flashed, but he kept his cool, stepping closer, his voice low and deliberate. Lazy? I've heard the tapes, Amber. We all have. You're saying it's all fake, but you haven't explained a single word. Why's that? The question was a scalpel, precise and unrelenting. The crowd hushed, sensing a turning point. Amber's breath hitched, her eyes darting to the audience, then to the exit, as if calculating her escape. You're not listening, she said, her voice shaking. But there was a new edge to it. Something desperate, almost pleading. You're all so quick to judge, but you don't know what it's like to be targeted, to have your life ripped apart. Jimmy didn't budge, his gaze locked on her. Targeted? Maybe. But those recordings don't sound like a victim, Amber. They sound like someone who's got some explaining to do. The crowd erupted again, some chanting, "Explain! Explain!" while others booed, their loyalty to Amber unwavering. She spun toward them, her voice raw. You think you're so righteous sitting there judging me? You're all part of this. You're eating it up. Her words were a lash, but they only fueled the audience's frenzy, their shouts drowning her out. Jimmy raised a hand, silencing the crowd with a single gesture. Let's cut the noise, he said, his voice firm, commanding. Amber, nobody's judging you more than you're judging yourself right now. You keep dodging, throwing blame, but you haven't answered one question. Why not just tell us what happened? What's stopping you? The studio fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. Amber's face contorted, a mix of rage and panic. What's stopping me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Then, louder. You're stopping me. This whole setup is designed to make me look bad. The accusation hung heavy, and the audience murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads. Jimmy's expression hardened, his patience thinning. A setup? Amber, you walked onto this stage. Nobody forced you. You could have come clean, but instead you're pointing fingers. That's not how you clear your name. He leaned back, arms crossed, his eyes daring her to respond. The crowd was a live wire, their energy crackling. Amber's hands trembled, her face a storm of emotions. You're twisting everything, she said, her voice low, almost a growl. You're making me the villain, but you don't know the half of it. Jimmy tilted his head, his voice sharp. Then tell me the half of it, Amber. Tell us. Right now. The challenge was electric, the studio holding its breath. Amber's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. The silence, stretched, taut, and unbearable, as every eye in the room bore down on her. Her next move could make or break her, and the world was watching, waiting for the truth, or another lie, to spill out. The studio was a crucible, every eye locked on Amber Heard, as she stood frozen, her lips parted, no words escaping. Jimmy Fallon's challenge. Then tell me the half of it, Amber. Tell us, right now. Hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The silence was suffocating, the audience's anticipation a palpable force. Amber's eyes, wide and wild, darted from Jimmy to the crowd, her breath shallow, her hands trembling at her sides. The weight of the moment pressed down, and, for a fleeting second, it seemed she might finally crack, might spill the truth, or at least a version of it. But then her expression hardened, her jaw clenching as she straightened, defiance flaring in her gaze. You want the truth? She said, her voice low and venomous, slicing through the hush. The truth is, you're all vultures. You, Jimmy, this audience, the whole world. You feed on tearing people down. The crowd gasped, a wave of boos and shouts erupting, but Amber barreled on, her voice rising. You think those recordings tell the whole story? They're scraps, twisted, to fit your narrative. I'm not the monster you want me to be. Her words were a desperate salvo, but they landed hollow, the audience's jeers growing louder, drowning her out. Jimmy, still standing, his face a mask of controlled fury, shook his head. Vultures? Amber, we're just asking for clarity. Those recordings aren't scraps. They're your voice, your words. You admitted things that don't line up with your story. If they're twisted, untwist them. Right here. Right now. His tone was razor-sharp, no trace of his usual warmth. The audience roared, some chanting, "Answer! Answer!" while others hurled insults at Amber. She spun toward them, her face flushed, her voice cracking. "You think you're so innocent? You're all complicit, lapping up lies to feel better about yourselves." The accusation ignited the crowd, their shouts a chaotic storm. Jimmy raised a hand, his authority cutting through the noise. "Enough, Amber. Stop blaming everyone else. You've had every chance to explain, and all you've done is dodge and deflect. If you're not lying, prove it. Tell us what really happened in those recordings." His words were a final ultimatum, his eyes boring into her. The studio fell into a tense hush, every phone trained on Amber, capturing her every move. Her chest heaved, her eyes flickering with a mix of rage and panic. For a moment it looked like she might try, might offer something to salvage herself. Instead she laughed, a bitter, jagged sound that sent a chill through the room. "Prove it? To you? You're not worth it, Jimmy. None of you are." The crowd exploded, boos and jeers crashing over her. Amber's face twisted, her voice rising to a scream. "You want a villain? Fine, I'll be your villain." She tore off her mic, the feedback screeching through the studio, and hurled it to the floor. The audience gasped, some standing, others shouting. Jimmy stepped forward, his voice steady but cold. "Amber, you're only proving my point. Running doesn't clear your name." She whirled on him, her eyes blazing. "I'm not running. I'm done. Done with you, done with this circus." She gestured wildly at the audience, who were now a sea of chaos, some chanting for her to leave, others begging her to stay and explain. Amber's gaze swept the room, her expression a mix of fury and despair. "You'll all regret this," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the din. "You think you've won, but you've just bought into the lies." With that, she turned on her heel, her heels clicking furiously as she stormed toward the stage exit. Jimmy called after her, his voice cutting through the noise. "Amber, the truth doesn't walk away. It faces the music." The crowd roared, a mix of cheers for Jimmy and jeers for Amber. She paused at the edge of the stage, her back to the audience, her shoulders rigid. For a heartbeat it seemed she might turn back, might say something to reclaim the narrative. But then she pushed through the curtain, disappearing into the wings, her exit met with a thunderous mix of boos and applause. The stage lights dimmed, and Jimmy stood alone, his face unreadable as the audience's energy pulsed around him. He turned to the crowd, his voice calm but firm. "Well, folks, that's not how we planned tonight to go." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but Jimmy's eyes were serious. "Sometimes the truth comes out in ways you don't expect. We'll be right back after this." The band struck up, the cameras panned to the cheering audience, and the show cut to commercial. But the buzz in Studio 6B lingered, the confrontation already going viral, clips of Amber's meltdown flooding social media. Her lies, her defiance, her dramatic exit. It was the talk show showdown no one saw coming, and no one would forget.